And we are live. What's up, everybody? It's Caleb and Matthew, and Matthew's not autofocused, so
No, I don't know what's going on right now. It's like auto-focused on my background. Let me fix that real fast.
we'll get there. Anyway, this is Books and Bourbon, episode 8. For those of you that have been complaining about my backdrop, we fixed that. We threw some bourbon in there, or maybe it's bourbon, maybe it's fake. You'll never know with today's world of fake backgrounds. But this is episode 8. If you've missed episodes 1 through 7, we're sorry. You can check those out anytime on the Book Flipper Community Facebook channel. If you are watching live either on Facebook or on YouTube, please drop us a note, say hello, introduce yourselves, and let us know where you're from and what you're drinking. So again, this is the show that talks a little bit about
There we go.
bourbon and a lot about books. All right, Matthew, you're back in black, looking good. At any rate, Matthew's been helping me out. We got a new camera set up, so if the quality looks better, that's great. We've got some new lighting and some other stuff coming in soon, so we're trying to make this look legit.
Big
So
improvements.
again, it's baby steps. I like to try and get stuff all the way figured out and launched, but again, taking action is really important, as we've talked about before. So again, a little bit of the format. We're going to get into an intro. We're going to talk about what we're drinking. We're going to share some market updates. We've got a really special guest today who we'll introduce shortly, and then we'll kind of get into a geek out moment. David is practicing riding motorcycles today, so he will probably not be joining, but that's all right. We've got 3 very fun people here. So thanks for saying hello, everybody that's there. All right. So today's guest, we'll introduce in just a second. He has a few hurdles that he's overcome. Anytime that you're in business, especially small business entrepreneurs, it's really just about problem solving. And there's often hurdles, there's barriers. Matthew, I don't know if you got the email today that Brex is shutting down some of their accounts.
Brex's? No,
Yes,
I did not get that email.
you might want to check it out. We ran into this before with Aslo, where they shut them down. And
Wait, Aslo shut down though altogether. Is Brex like shutting down altogether?
No, they're shutting down smaller accounts. It sounds like they kind of only want to serve the big boys. So I've got about 5 business accounts, and 3 of them got the axe already. So we'll see if the other 2 go
Seriously?
through.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I gotta look at my stuff then.
So anyway, right on cue, business is all about solving problems. And today's guest has had their own hurdles. They actually live in Alaska, which I joke about. Nobody lives in Vermont, but I don't think anybody actually lives in Alaska either. And he's overcome a bunch of hurdles there to get his business started. And he's also pivoted. So many of you ask, books are a great gateway drug to get into the business. And then what do you do after books? What else is there? How do you scale a business, especially if you're in a remote location like Alaska or a small town? And today's guest will help us explain both of those. So without further ado, let's bring in Josiah. Josiah, welcome to the show.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. We're glad you're here. As we were talking in the pre-show, I think you're a little conflicted. You live in Alaska, yet you're wearing a Hawaiian shirt. So let's start there. Can we explain that dichotomy?
Yeah, a couple friends and I, often on dark, cold winter days, like to have Aloha Sundays, where we wear our Aloha shirts and shorts and sandals and close our eyes and wish we were somewhere warmer. I have been thinking about going somewhere warm for the winters in the future.
Probably not a bad idea.
Yeah. Hawaii's on the list as a maybe. I've heard good things about Costa Rica. That's one I'm looking into. So we'll see.
How warm is it this time of year where you are?
It's pretty nice right now. It's mid 60s. A week or 2 ago, it got upper 70s, which is on the warmer side.
All right. Well, I'll trade you. Matthew, it's probably 105 degrees there today.
Oh, I'm sure it's something like that. Yeah.
Indiana's got a bit of a heat wave. It's been 95 this week and a ton of humidity. So we're struggling here.
108 today.
108.
Wow.
With a high of 110. So we're not even at the top yet.
Jeez, I would love to hug a glacier. That just sounds amazing.
It is amazing.
So, Josiah, I'm sure it's just a rumor, but you don't live in an igloo, do you?
I do, and if you guys keep throwing straws into the ocean, my igloo's going to melt more. No, I live in Anchorage, which is the biggest city in Alaska, about around 300,000 or so residents. But that's the biggest city. So
Perfect. Well, we'll get into your story in just a moment. We're glad you're here. Let's shift gears to the bourbon part of the show. So what are you all drinking today? I'll jump in first. I've got a very classic one. It's hard to know what to drink when it's so stinking hot outside. I thought maybe tequila might make more sense, maybe a nice Corona or something. But I've got a good sipping bourbon. It is Woodford Reserve Double Oaked. It's kind of a trendy, very similar to toasted barrels if you're into those things as well. This particular bottle typically retails for 60, but if you're lucky and find it at Costco, you can pick it up for like 42 to 45 bucks. So it's pretty good. I love the double oaked. It's got a great flavor, and it's just a good go-to bourbon in general. So Matthew, what do you got over in 108-degree land today?
Yeah. Well, I actually have bourbon today. Most days I don't. The last 2 times I haven't had bourbon. Someone called me out in the comments. So I've got some Knob Creek 9-year right here. This is a little bit of a, let me block my face. Maybe I'll zoom in. There we go. Whatever. Knob Creek 9-year. This is a little nod to our business partner and developer. He dropped this off last time he was in town, and I haven't really had a chance to have much of it since then. So I'm going to be opening that up today again.
He's giving you the cheap stuff. I know he really likes.
I know the cheap stuff.
So I think if you mix a 9 and a 6-year, if they have a 6-year, I think that becomes the same as a 15.
Really, it adds up together. Adds all the flavors of the.
What do you got in Alaska there, Josiah?
Well, it's about noon here, and I was looking for my mimosas, like you suggested. Couldn't find it, but I got a little rum in my coffee here.
There we go.
I've been dabbling with some different bourbons, but decided to go with just a little rum in the coffee this morning. Cause gotta do some other stuff this afternoon.
I love it. It's a classic start to the week.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to shift gears here, talk a little bit about a market update or something that we're learning in the Amazon world specifically. One thing is you probably got in the emails, there's remote fulfillment, and Amazon rolled that out, I believe, in 2019, possibly even earlier. What remote fulfillment is, they also call it remote or NARF, North American Remote Fulfillment, which is the worst acronym ever. But you can sign up for NARF. What that allows you to do is if you sell FBA or fulfilled by Amazon, Amazon will cross-list your inventory from a U.S. fulfillment center into Canada and Mexico. And they'll take care of getting it across the border. They'll take care of taxes. The customer pays all the fees there. Your fees are higher to do it, so you do need to double check and make sure you set up rules. So that's been an option for FBA sellers for a couple of years now. And I know that our friends that do retail arbitrage, online arbitrage, and a lot of wholesale have been getting into that, and that's a good way to expand. It's a little different than the FBA export or the global export program. Global export means anybody in the world can buy, but they have to look for your items on Amazon.com or the US market. The remote fulfillment means that your listings will actually be populated into Canada and Mexico. So if someone goes to Amazon.ca, they can see your listings. Now, a couple things you do need to check on the fees there. And what the news is that's coming out, it's been announced for a couple weeks here. Amazon is going to be, in typical Amazon fashion, auto enrolling everybody into the remote fulfillment program. So you can go in, there's links in your email. You can actually opt out of those programs. I've done that. I haven't researched it fully yet. I looked at it a little bit more since last week. I've seen some people in our Facebook group saying that they won't allow you to cross list or remote fulfill items that have condition notes. I don't know if that's true. So in the book world, I think you could probably sell new items, but perhaps not used. I can't see any documentation of that. So if that's true, if you guys have some sort of a link or some sort of a note, if you would post that, we'll dig that up further and check that out and actually talk about that next week before it goes live. But in the meantime, that might be something to look into, and you might want to opt out of that. So that is remote fulfillment. Again, you should sign up for the FBA Global Export. That's really easy to do. Your inventory is now available all over the world, and you might want to opt out of remote fulfillment. That's what I'm doing, unless I hear a compelling reason to stick around, because I don't want to deal with extra fees and dealing with different pricing. So on one hand, it's nice to get your inventory exposed to other cultures, other markets, other customers, but it may not work for books. So we'll fill that in a little bit more I should have done just a little more homework, but I couldn't find it actually. So again, if you've seen that information and understand that it does not work for books or anything with condition notes, if you could link to that, that would be awesome. I don't just want to share hearsay, but I did it anyway. So that is what is going on. Matthew, anything else big in Amazon or what you're learning kind of in the online space right now?
Well, we're doing a little market segment right now. This
Yep.
is kind of like our little market. We could talk a little bit about, because I know I've seen this question pop up in the group a lot lately, and someone actually just asked it right here. Just what if during a recession, what does it look like selling on Amazon, and what are the possible outcomes? Granted, no one knows 100% sure what it's going to look like during a recession, but we were just talking about this yesterday, Caleb, and you were sharing some thoughts on what you were thinking a recession would look like for Amazon sellers.
Yeah, I wish David was on, because he's he was selling during the first recession there, so he's probably got
Yeah.
actual sales experience. In general, in recessions, people do tighten up their spending, so that is something that that gets difficult. So people will be buying fewer things, especially online. They typically trade down, so instead of buying new, they would buy used. Instead of buying name brand, they might buy off brand. So discount stores, Costco, the like, tend to do better in recessions, especially because they haven't raised the prices on their hot dogs in any time really. And
Best
then
part.
in terms of books, I don't know what happens to books if they go up or down. I imagine if people aren't working, they don't want to spend money on education, but they also have more time, and so they tend to do more research online, trying to pick up new side hustles. So I would imagine that education in general suffers, like college enrollment. Although, again, if people are unemployed or trying to hope for the future, they may decide to invest in themselves. But in general, just from what we know of recessions, I can't speak exactly to books, but that's kind of my thought. So people would trade down. I think they would buy used goods over new goods, and that should apply to books as well. Why spend $16 at Barnes and Noble when you can spend $7 on Amazon and pick it up? And then I don't know if there's a focus on education, but that would be my hunch. As people are home more, they're going to watch more TV, but they're also going to try and better themselves. So
Yeah.
on programs, maybe that applies to books as well.
Yeah. No, I assume that a lot of people, since books are purchased all the time, that a lot of people, like you said, will switch to buying used books that normally would just click that new buy box. It'd be interesting to see what percentage of people in a recession, depends on how bad of a recession, actually switch to buying used books versus new books. That might make a increased demand for some used books online potentially.
Yep. We've got somebody that ran a retail bookstore in 2008. They said their used book section stayed strong, so that tends to make sense as well. So thanks for chiming in, Rabbit Ridge. All right, that's a little bit of a market update. Let's jump into the story. Again, entrepreneurs in general are problem solvers. That's what sets us apart, and there's always problems to solve, and so there will always be business. So Josiah, you've got let's walk through your background. You said you were in the military to start things off, and then kind of switched over to Amazon at some point. So walk us through that. What branch were you in?
Yeah. So grew up on the East Coast, went to college on the East Coast, studied computer engineering, and I graduated with that degree and commissioned as a U.S. Army officer. Then the Army, after some training, brought me and my wife up here to Alaska, and we fell in love with Alaska right away, and we've loved every moment. So we've been here in Alaska for about 5 years. Had a great time in the military, learned a lot of opportunities, but it wasn't something I wanted to do for 20 years.
Yep.
So at the end of my contract, or about a year before my contract ended, I started trying to decide what to do next. And the obvious option was kind of go into engineering or IT management and project management stuff. And that just didn't really excite me. Would have been a solid career option though. So I started looking at what it was about the military that I didn't really enjoy. And I realized a lot of corporate America had the same things. So with that conclusion, I started exploring different business opportunities and came across Amazon as one of them. In college, I had, in an attempt to get a few dollars more than the local bookstore was offering me for my used textbooks, I had stumbled across Amazon's program for trading gift cards for your used textbooks. I don't think they've done that in a number of years, but I enjoyed that as a student.
Yeah, that's
And
how they started it, and then they actually had like trade-in offers, and so you could, I believe it was the same thing. I don't know if they ever allowed you to do cash, although you could sort of cash out those certificates through some of the online sites that would allow you to sell those.
yeah, so that was a great program that they had, and I got a lot of trade-in opportunities with that. And then there was one book in particular that they weren't offering any trade-in gift cards. And I discovered the little tiny button on the bottom right that says sell this book or sell on Amazon, and just kind of followed that rabbit trail and accidentally signed up for a seller's account, and I sold 2 or 3 textbooks back in probably 2013 or 14, and then didn't do anything else for about 6 years. In the meantime, I've always dabbled in flipping stuff on eBay, like things from thrift stores or old stuff I don't need anymore. So kind of had an understanding of that kind of marketplace. And in exploring different business options in my quest to leave the Army, discovered selling used books on Amazon. A lot of Scout IQ content from both of you guys on YouTube really helped me gain some knowledge in that area. And then as you looked up earlier, what was it, August of 2019?
Yep, is when you signed up.
I got the Scout IQ trial. So that's probably when I first seriously started looking at selling on Amazon and looking for inventory.
Sure. So let's back up a step. First off, thank you for your service. I know that it's underappreciated at times, but we do appreciate that. Freedom is a big word that drives me forward, and I would not have that here in America if it weren't for men and women like yourself. So we do appreciate that service. Growing up, did you always want to be in the military? Did you have family in the military? Like what drove you to make that decision initially?
The biggest driving force for me, I grew up in Northern Virginia, so the DC bubble, and every third person I knew was in the military or had been in the military. So I heard a lot about the men that I grew up around and their experience in the military. I don't have a military history in my family, but it was mostly the men in my life outside of my family that influenced me there. And I was heavily involved in Boy Scouts, and there's a little bit of similarities there between the structure of the Boy Scout program and the military. So I decided it was something I wanted to try, at least for one contract. I joined not expecting to stay in long term, but an experience and an opportunity to serve.
Yeah. So did you do the ROTC route and go through college and do that, or did you jump right into the Army?
Yeah, I did ROTC throughout college. So starting my freshman year, and that was definitely difficult to balance with a engineering degree, but I made it through.
Fantastic.
Nice.
So you're obviously an entrepreneur now. We'll get to some of the other things you've done to sort of graduate or move up out of the book space and kind of do some other things in the entrepreneurial space. Were there clues along the way, like in middle school, high school? You said you got into flipping things once you moved to Alaska, but did you do anything else like sell candy bars or do car washes or anything else entrepreneurial in like essentially in your youth?
A few things here and there. Yeah. My parents did some eBay on and off, and through that I sold a few things on eBay through their account when I was in middle or high school. I think some of the first big, wow, this is amazing flips. There was a vintage Super Soaker that I found at a garage sale. And it was an awesome Super Soaker, like the old school ones where it's like a water bottle canister and it's got the really good pressurization system. I played with that for a couple years and was kind of done. And then my dad helped me sell that on eBay for, I think, over $100 for this $5 toy. What's that?
The Super Soaker 50, they were like a yellow and had like a green canister.
I think so. Yeah. It had the green canister.
Yeah, they're going for $75 on eBay right now. That I grew up playing with that. I have a twin brother and a brother a year younger. Those things were awesome.
I'll look
Yeah.
up a picture real fast. I think I know what it looks like.
Yeah, the Super Soaker 50. I remember like we thought we were king of the hill having those things, and like you said, it had the pressurization. You could do 6, 8, 10 pumps, and then that thing went for a while. It was a pretty good.
Oh yeah, I had one of those.
Nice.
It
Any
was
other
great.
hints along the way that you were an entrepreneur, or did that kind of catch you off guard later on when you tried to decide what you liked or didn't like about the military?
It definitely caught me off guard. I never saw it as something I'd go after in a full-time capacity. And eBay kind of stuck with me throughout even college. I flipped a few things here and there, but it was really just that's kind of like a little side hustle money to be able to have a little extra spending money to do whatever I wanted on the weekends.
Yep. Cool. All right. So you got in the military. They moved you to Alaska. When did you get married along the way?
Right after graduating. So between graduating and moving up to Alaska. So a lot of transitions for me and my wife that year.
Yeah, a lot of big changes for sure, especially moving from not only the East Coast to the West Coast, but the far northwest coast of the U.S.
Yeah.
All right. So when you started getting into selling on Amazon, some of the hurdles there, you said Anchorage is about what, 300,000 people?
Yeah, a little under 300,000.
And then in terms of driving to other cities in the area, is that pretty feasible in terms of sourcing books and other inventory, or is it pretty much just Anchorage and that's your only option?
There's a little bit, but Anchorage is the primary option there. There's two smaller cities about an hour north, and I would, when I was doing books, drive there pretty often, a couple times a month. And everything else is more remote. Their book options are not as dense, or it's just decent travel distance away. I did try a couple other cities and had decent success. It just wasn't feasible to get there often.
Yep. So anytime there's a hurdle, it also means there's an opportunity, because the fact that there's not a lot of books, the fact that one of the things we talked about in the pre-show as well is when you go to ship to an FBA center, you don't have the luxury of getting the partner carrier rates on FedEx or UPS. And so your shipping costs, your inbound shipping costs are going to be higher than someone that's sourcing books from the continental US. And so that's just one hurdle where you could say, hey, I can't compete. It's too expensive. I'm just not going to play the game. But anytime there's hurdles or challenges, that means fewer people from your market will do it, which means there's less competition, which typically means it might be better for you in terms of finding inventory. So walk us through if you can't get the discounted carrier rates, what did you use to actually ship into the FBA fulfillment centers?
Yeah, I found media mail to be the best option. I think if you're shipping books and you don't care too much about the speed, that's generally going to be the cheapest outside of Amazon discounted rates. And I think on average was around 50 cents a pound. So that's not too bad price wise. What's the average rate with the discounted?
It keeps going up. We do pallets, so I haven't shipped an individual box in a while, but typically it just depends on zone, how close it is. But we end up with, it typically costs us, when I was starting, anywhere from $9 to like $14 or $15 for a 50-pound box. So somewhere between 20 and 30 cents a pound probably. And I'm sure that's gone up recently just with the cost of everything going up.
It's like 31, 32 consistently here since a pound. Yeah, cents a pound.
Yeah, so it's not the end of the world. The average book's a little over a pound, so it might cost you an extra, 10 cents to ship a book. So you just have to factor that into your buy cost, essentially. So
Okay.
you got started. Walk us through. I know you flipped a couple college books and then decided to kind of give Amazon a serious go. What did your schedule look like? Were you doing this on the side with the military, or did you quit the Army and then jump right into Amazon?
Yeah, I was doing it on the side while I was still in the military. So I completed my contract and got out fall of 2020, and I started dabbling with Scout IQ about a year prior to that. And really had no design to do Amazon full time. That was still going to be a side hustle, and we were pursuing Airbnb arbitrage with the pretty lucrative tourism market here in Alaska. Well, we had looked at a bunch of properties and we were getting close to signing some contracts related to that. And then all that stuff happened early 2020. And thankfully, we hadn't signed any contracts because that, like most of the entire world, shut down tourism. And so that was really frustrating. We're like, well, that was our plan. That was our ticket out of the military, how we're going to make ends meet. Do I need to go get a job now? And it's kind of back to the drawing board. And I took a second look.
Pause real quick. You said Airbnb arbitrage. Is that where you rent a house and then have the ability to sublet it and do Airbnb with something you rent versus owning?
Exactly. Yeah. You get written into the lease agreement that it's okay for you to basically furnish and sublet on Airbnb.
All right. So again, banks shut down your accounts from time to time. Amazon, it's their sandbox. There's some challenges there. Your whole Airbnb idea, COVID, kind of threw a wrench in that because people weren't going to be traveling up to Alaska anytime soon. So Amazon, you kind of had this book thing in the back of your mind, but walk us through kind of those next steps late 2020 where you said, hey, I got to figure something out to put food on the table. So where did you land from there?
Yeah, so using some of your really helpful spreadsheets, I did some numbers and tried to figure out how many books I need in my inventory in order to make the income that we want to survive off of. And that was a pretty high number. And I did my best throughout the first 6 months or so of 2020 to get up to that number. I just couldn't get it there. Part of it, I was doing this on the side while I still had military obligations. Part of it was other challenges like the speed of shipping. With medium mail from Alaska, it took on average around 3 weeks by barge to get from Anchorage to Tacoma, and then they'd truck it from there down to one of the FBA warehouses in California. So that really slowed the ability to stack sales and grow from there. And the limited inventory in my area. So I started cherry picking all the thrift stores in town and then the thrift stores about an hour away, and that still wasn't getting me enough. Started looking at auction sites for local auctions. A couple of them would do estate cleanouts, and so you just see kind of a picture of a couple bookcases and you could bid on it. And so I'd zoom in as close as I could and be looking up the titles. Yeah. And that wasn't really worth my time. Ended up getting more duds than it was worth. And then I tried the free book removal pickup, did a lot of pickups for people moving or people cleaning out relatives' households. And that was okay. Again, a lot of duds, and that's kind of like baby bulk game there. Wasn't really something I was interested in. Probably nearly broke the shocks on one of my SUVs loading it up so much, but good experience. And so from there, I was realizing I'm just not getting to the number of books that I think I need. I couldn't scale up that high. So I looked into
walking through some of the numbers. What was your inventory levels? Do you remember? And then what was like your best month or two in terms of just books only?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Are we talking 1,000 books, 10,000 books, like just rough scale of the operation?
Yeah, my goal was to get over 10,000 books. And I think at the peak I had around 3,000 in stock.
Okay.
My revenue numbers, I don't remember it all right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I was trying to look earlier, but it's kind of hard to find that data because it's a couple of years ago now.
Well, because that's 2 years back. If you had the tracking spreadsheet, shameless plug, you could look at those sales. But in general, if you had 3,000 books in inventory, you're probably selling, let's call it 20%, probably 15 to 20% of those. So you probably sold 600 books on maybe your peak month there. And then depending on your average selling price, if you were selling for $18 a book, it's about $10,000. You probably got to maybe ish 10,000. Does that sound about right in terms of like your best month ever just selling books?
I think I got close. Probably between 7 and 9.
Yeah. So at about 8 grand, maybe 40% of that comes back from Amazon after all the fees and inbound shipping and everything else. So you're probably getting to like 3 grand ish a month in terms of payout, and then of course minus your buy cost and everything else. So not bad. That's pretty impressive to source 3,000 books in a small town. 300,000 people is not super small. I live in a town of 15,000, but I do have bigger cities that are drivable from here. So you saw that books were okay. Again, we talk about it as the gateway drug, and I'm sure people watching I'm sure some of them can actually empathize with that, where they say, yeah, I've kind of tapped out all the sources in my area. I've tried to get creative. I've tried to do next door posts. I've tried to do estate sale cleanouts. I've tried to partner with thrift stores, whatever it might be. And like, it can only take you so far. So 3 grand as a side hustle is not a bad gig, but if you're trying to, support you and your wife in an expensive area, I don't think Alaska is very cheap to live in. 3 grand a month isn't going to cut it. So the next part of the interview, again, we're primarily a book app. We work for anything. You can do live lookups, but in general, our audience is booksellers. So I think this is actually incredibly relevant for those that, get to the point where they've kind of learned the ropes. They figured out how to sell. They've built up some account history. They've taken risks. They've made mistakes. Typically, again, on cheap inventory, books are, 50 cents to a couple bucks a piece. So if you're going to make mistakes there, it's good to do it on stuff that costs $1 or $2 versus making mistakes on electronics that might cost, 50 to a couple $100 where you're making mistakes there. So you kind of realized you needed to pivot and switch gears. That's just fancy business talk for that didn't work. And so let's try something else. So where did you go from there? Because I'm curious, and I'm sure people watching are going, hey, if they can empathize with that, they go, hey, what else can we do? So what did you explore next?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the biggest thing, I really enjoyed the Amazon platform, and that was working. I just couldn't get the quantity of inventory and the turnover rate for the speed of getting my return back was just too slow with the books. So I did two things. I started looking into retail arbitrage, going to mostly the bigger box stores in my area, picking up the clearance stuff, doing things like BrickSeek to find the hidden clearance. And I was starting to get some improved velocity with that, merchant fulfilling it all, really focusing on stuff that was under £1 so I could ship it first class USPS, or heavier stuff that could fit into flat rate boxes. But I didn't want to give up books. I just didn't have time to do both. So I went out and I hired 2 individuals to help me. And I had them cherry picking all the thrift stores in town for me at a commission type rate based off of how many books they found. And that had okay success. There were some weeks where
Incentive program, because a lot of people ask how to do scouts, and they're always curious, and I'm curious too. Did you pay them per book? What was the actual setup there in terms of how did you reimburse them?
yeah, I paid them per book, and then I reimbursed the purchase price. So they'd give me the receipt from Goodwill, and I'd give them, $70 for that. And if that was for 30 books, I'd give them $30 commission. So $30 was really what they'd make off that. And then in order to motivate them to put more time into it and to find more books, I gave them kind of a tiered incentive. If you hit 50 books this week, I'll give you an extra $20. If you hit 100 this week, I'll give you an extra $50.
Love it. And then did you set them up on hidden mode, or did you let them see the data and understand what was going on?
I let them see the data because I needed them to be able to calculate the profit numbers. And
Yep.
most of the thrift stores in my area had individually stickered books, and the price would be different for every book. So I couldn't put a flat cost per book into the app with hidden mode.
Yep. Nope. That makes sense. Yeah, especially when there's variable pricing, that can be challenging. So for those of you that aren't aware, you can do with Scout IQ, we have what's called child accounts. You don't have to give them to children. They just mean your main account is the parent, and you can set up sub accounts or child accounts, or just sub users is kind of a better way to say it. I'm boring Matthew over there. He's already yawning. It's only
I
noon.
know. It's the
Gotta
bourbon.
get
It's putting me to sleep. I'm kidding.
caffeine instead of some bourbon. But you can set up child accounts. You have the ability to control their triggers, to control what's going on, and it's a really good way to kind of scale. We see a lot of spouse or significant other teams of two, where you add kind of a sub account. They're available for discounted rates, and then the hidden mode option is pretty fascinating. That tends to work better in a consignment relationship where the books are essentially free. But you can set up the rules, you can set a buy cost if you want, but all that's hidden, and they scan a book and literally all it says is green with a check mark, like yes, you should accept it, or red with an X and says no, you should not. And it's very, very simple and streamlined. So if that's one way to kind of ramp up. So you had your scouts going, and then that I'm sure you ran into some hurdles there, and some of the inability to scale. So at what point did you say, hey, I've got to move away from books or kind of supplement books? And then where did you go next?
Yeah, part of it was I was spending 40 hours a week myself, 20 to 30 hours in thrift stores cherry picking, and then 10 to 15 hours prepping and shipping. And that wasn't getting the quantity I needed. So it's time to outsource. So I had a little more time to continue to grow the business. And so from there, I didn't really do any further book sourcing myself. Left that in the hands of those two. And I went into retail arbitrage opportunities really to find quicker flips. And in general, the ROI wasn't as good as the books, but there was still some really good opportunities, sometimes over 100%. And what was great is merchant fulfilling it. Sometimes I could sell it that day that I purchased it from Walmart, and I had it sold by the afternoon, and I'd have that money plus the profit back in my account in about 2 weeks or so, based off the Amazon payment system.
Yeah, that's awesome. Were you merchant fulfilling to the continental US?
Yes.
And then what were you shipping with? Because you can't use media mail if it's not media or book. So what were your options there through Amazon?
Right. Through my eBay experience, I was fairly familiar with the USPS rates. And so mostly USPS is what I used. And I really targeted stuff under £1 because I could ship that first class, with the most expensive first class label being around $6. So pretty affordable still. And then a lot of flat rate stuff. At a certain point during COVID, when dumbbells were hot, I was stuffing an $8 padded flat rate mailer with 40 pounds worth of dumbbells. There's a certain method where you can kind of stretch it a little, and then you can slide them in, and then you got to wrap that bad boy in a lot of tape.
Well, I guess the benefit of selling books prior to that is you're used to lifting 40 and 50 pound packages. So you were training for shipping those dumbbells all along.
Yeah. At one point we moved our houses that we were renting in, and one criteria was I want my office space to be on the first floor. I can't be carrying books up to the second floor anymore. Now that helped a lot.
It's good condition.
That is a good life decision right there. All right. So you ended up getting into retail arbitrage. I know you've mentioned some online arbitrage as well. So explain your overall business. I know you've got Turo. We'll get to that in just a second. But what are your kind of platform breakdowns and kind of sourcing breakdowns right now? Are you still doing books at this point, or have you kind of moved past those?
At this point, I have a few books left. I actually bought through Pallet IQ a lot of books from you all. I don't remember when now, and I put that in a secondary Amazon account and kind of forgot about it.
Did you ship those to Alaska?
No. Had
a prep center.
Whoever you set me up with had him prep them and send them to the warehouse for me.
Okay, gotcha. So you've done a little bit of books there. What's your main sourcing ideas right now? Is it retail arbitrage or online?
Right now, almost all online arbitrage. I got tired of driving around to all the retail stores, and that was sucking a lot of time. And I also wasn't able to scale in the way I wanted to. That retail arbitrage is, at least the way I was doing it, still a lot of one-offs, like books, like used books. And so I
Yep.
wanted something where I could purchase 10, 20, 30 units. And so I've been doing almost fully online arbitrage since about January, and that's been doing really good for us. And that way, using a prep center, I can avoid the whole shipping to and from Alaska problem, and I don't have to touch the products, and I actually make more money.
Yeah. So for those that aren't familiar, retail arbitrage is just like hunting for books, but you're looking for, non-book products. You can still go to Goodwill. People do it with clothes. Typically, you go to like Walmart's and CVS and those type of stores, and you're looking for clearance items. You're looking for regional items. I'm sure there's products in Alaska that you can't get in the continental U.S. And if you live in Indiana like I do, and you really want a really nice Alaskan treat or drink, the only way to get that is typically on Amazon. So Josiah and others that are doing retail arbitrage are actually kind of filling the catalog on Amazon for products that I can't find in Indiana, and I'm willing to pay a premium for that service and order it in. And then the online arbitrage is are you using a software for that, or what's your main area there for finding stuff?
Some of it's manual searching, reverse searching other Amazon seller storefronts. I use tactical arbitrage, and I also have a virtual assistant now that does a little of all that, and mostly manual.
Yeah. So again, tactical arbitrage is a tool that allows you to search pretty much any retail site, typically Walmart and some of the other sites, but it allows you to essentially look through their inventory, look at the current pricing, and then compare that to what it's selling for on Amazon, look at the sales rank history, and then kind of make informed decisions based on how much profit and ROI you would like to make. So again, business is what problems you're going to solve, but it's also setting up your life in such a way that, like, I love the fact that you mentioned you knew your number. You said when you were setting out to do books, you took the spreadsheet that we had. For those that want the spreadsheet, you can check it out at the 100bookchallenge.com. We'll see how fast, Matthew, can get that up on the website. But the 100bookchallenge.com, boom, baby, allows you to kind of build that model. And I love that. I think a good entrepreneur, someone that like has a good vision, sets up what that number is first. They try and say, what does success look like for me? And for you, you had a number in mind, whether that was $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month, it doesn't matter. That's a personal number. But you had some sort of a number and a goal that you were trying to reach. And you said, I'm going to try and stretch and try and build a business that can create this much revenue, this much profit for my family. And once you had that number, that allows you to work the problem backwards. The cool part is as you've migrated, as you realize books could probably get to $2,000 to $3,000 a month based on where you were located, you said that wasn't going to cut it and said, all right, how do we ramp this up? So you tried scouts, you tried retail arbitrage, and then you sort of settled on the online arbitrage world. The benefit of online arbitrage plus a prep center, so somebody else that's receiving the inventory, especially since you're located in Alaska, and that'd be quite costly to ship stuff to you, process it, and then ship it back to a fulfillment center. That's just a lot of needless shipping, and freight's pretty expensive these days. The benefit of all that is you've essentially built a location independent business. It doesn't matter if you're in Alaska, Hawaii, Japan, back in the States, the continental US, it doesn't really matter. That business and that system you've built allows you to sort of live anywhere that you want, which is pretty fascinating. So let's we got a couple more minutes here just on the interview, then we'll take some questions as well. You mentioned Turo. Do you want to explain what that is for those that aren't familiar?
Yeah, so it's like Airbnb, but for rental cars. Very similar option there, and it's a great platform for you to find a specific car. If you want to rent a car from, say, Hertz, you're going to pick a mid-sized sedan. If you go on Turo, you can pick the exact Corolla, and you can see what kind of rims it has. And so there's a little bit more ability to pick and choose there. And here in Alaska and most of the US, with the COVID stuff, a lot of the rental car companies had to liquidate their fleets, and they're still having trouble catching back up to the demand, especially so here in Alaska. So there was a really unique business opportunity where there was an extreme shortage of rental cars last year. So we picked up our first car last summer, and then that did really well. We actually ran it through the winter, and we did make enough money to make it worth it through the winter. It was sitting a lot more, but and now starting off this summer, we have 4 cars total, and that's really cool opportunity, and been spending just about as much time on that recently as I have Amazon stuff.
So your first car, did you just use your own car, or did you get a car specifically for Turo with this idea in mind at the beginning?
Got it specifically for Turo. So we've had a travel agency LLC set up for a number of years, and that's kind of been up and down with how travel has been. And so it's a natural extension to that business. So we purchased a vehicle off of Facebook specifically for Turo, titled it under the LLC, and listed it on Turo, and also got some commercial fleet insurance as well to make sure we're covered there.
Nice.
So for those that aren't aware, Turo, again, is a way to rent your car. Very similar to Airbnb. You own the house, you rent the house, you can sublet that, or rent that out to short-term renters. In terms of running the Turo side of things, walk us through the economics of it. You buy a car, you've got that sitting there. How many days, like what's your occupancy rate, or how many days a month do you typically rent a car out?
That's going to depend a ton on your location. For us over the winter, our utilization was probably about 40%, fairly low. And some of that was due to learning curve with our pricing strategy. We weren't aggressive enough certain months with pricing against competitors. Here in the summer now, we're at probably about 80% utilization, which is really, really good for across 4 cars. And
That is really good.
And the rates we're able to get summer versus winter are 3 to 4 times as high.
Crazy. I know, Matthew, you use Turo when you're traveling a bit when we go to Denver.
I use Turo all the time. I love Turo. I've never rented my car out through Turo, but I do love Turo. I use it all the time when I'm traveling. Yeah.
And
It's
again,
been great. I really like you said, there's a big benefit to be able to go on Turo and pick out the exact car you want. To be able to go through and look. Like I went to Colorado not too long ago, and instead of just getting a mid-sized sedan or something like that, like you were saying from the rental car company, I was like, it's going to be snowing 3 days of the 4 I'm going to be there. I'm going to rent something with 4-wheel drive that looks like it's got good tires on it that I know will be safe in the snow there. And I picked out the exact car that would work for that. And in the summer, you can do the exact opposite. Find a nice sportier car that's a good rate that week. And it's kind of fun to be able to actually pick the car versus just show up and see what kind of basic sedan you get for the week.
Absolutely. Yeah. And another, depending on how the host does it, the pickup process for a Turo car can be easier. We have ours parked at a lot near the airport, and it's got a lockbox on it. You don't have to stand in a line at Hertz for 30 minutes for them to tell you that they're sold out of cars or something.
Yeah, it's way more convenient. I've found, as long as you, like you said, it's in a convenient location. I always check the box in Turo that I want it free delivery to the airport whenever I go somewhere.
Yeah.
And a lot of cars do have that. I just walk out to the parking lot. Some of them have different ways to get into the vehicle. Depends on what you're renting, but you just get in and drive away. I've waited so long at the Denver airport before at rental car places, just waiting in line. And so Turo, most of the time I get a cheaper vehicle and I wait less and I can pick out the vehicle I want. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Turo.
I love it. So Josiah, Airbnb is kind of picked back up now that COVID is not completely in the rearview mirror, but definitely trending more toward that. Travel is nearly where it used to be pre-COVID. Is Airbnb something you're going to consider moving forward?
Yes, long term, that's definitely a plan to get into. I was actually talking with my wife the other day about where do we put some of our capital right now, and that's a hard decision to make. Do we put it into Amazon? Do we buy some more Turo cars, or do we start looking at property, maybe buy some land and put some rustic Alaskan cabins on it to put on Airbnb? So
And you
I'm
could,
kind of leaning towards land right now. That sounds more fun, honestly.
well, and
That would be
anything big
cool.
early. So Airbnb, we're still somewhat early, but like most people know about it. I would say Turo, we're still early on in that process. I think if there's not a lot of people doing Turo yet. So in terms of it's probably easier to make money over time as the market matures, pricing probably comes down.
Yes.
But anytime you can be creative, anytime you can have a special car. So if you're just going to rent Corollas, for example, that's going to be harder to stand out when the market matures. If you've got, a nice Porsche 911 or a Tesla or something that's unique, that allows you to stand out from the crowd. And there's probably that runway lasts a little bit longer. I believe the same thing's true in Airbnb. If you're just going to buy a house in a neighborhood that's cookie cutter, anybody else in the neighborhood can turn their house into an Airbnb. And now you're competing against price. Versus if you do something that's rustic or unique, someone's always going to be willing to pay a premium for something that's unique. So I love that model. Well, that's really fascinating. Thanks for sharing a bit of that journey. I love how people start with books and then find ways to graduate or mature or add other things. And whether you keep books or sort of graduate out of it, I think that's still it's teaching you the principles of business. Those skills can transfer into some other things as well. So if you had a crystal ball and you could flash forward, 3 to 5 years, what do you hope that you're doing? What do you see yourself doing? What kind of business things do you think you'll pursue over the next 3 to 5 years?
That's a really good question. I think property of some type, whether it's direct rentals or Airbnb, is long-term goal. Hopefully 3 to 5 years from now, we'll be at least starting down that path, if not deep into it. One thing I have noticed in our journey through these different businesses is we enjoy starting stuff and getting it up and running, and then I don't know if we get bored and want to do something new, but not quite the shiny object syndrome. Like I still want to do Amazon, and I love Amazon, and it's really lucrative right now, and I've gotten it to the point where with all the systems and stuff, it doesn't consume the majority of my week. So I have time to work on other projects, which is really fun place to be. It's just hard to pick which projects do I want to work on. Right now, that's cars for Turo. What will it be next? Probably Airbnb.
Well, I think that's a really common sentiment among
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. And that's why one of the things I talk about quite a bit, it's kind of my own mantra, but it's the idea of start up, scale up, and then step back. Because it's super fun to solve problems. It's really fun to go after new things, whether it's shiny or not. It's still exciting to be solving that new problem. So that's the startup phase. Scaling it's really fun. You're trying to build systems. You're trying to put people around it. You're trying to make sure that the model works and that you can, add gas to that fire and make sure that it continues to work even as you ramp things up. And then, of course, my favorite is trying to figure out how to step back and hire people, create jobs, and kind of build the systems so be it that you can either sell it and sell that business, which is a little bit harder in the Amazon space, or you can kind of put systems and people in place so that you can then move your time and attention to focus on that next one. And if you do that right, everybody talks about multiple streams of income and residual income, passive income. A lot of these things can essentially move into that space if you set those up right. And then you can take your time, solve the biggest problems, and go back and kind of, touch up some of the businesses that you've started. But most of that time, sort of that 80-20 rule, you can apply your time to that next big challenge. That's the beauty of business. We don't know where it's going to take us. We have all these grand ideas and aims when we start off, and sometimes that works. Sometimes we hit that mark. Sometimes we pivot and end up in a wildly different place than we could have ever imagined.
Absolutely. I think bottom line, I'll probably never have a job again.
I say I'm unemployable. I'm not too proud to go back to an office setting, but I love the fact that I can be off golfing on a Tuesday morning. I do sacrifice, and I'll be working on a Sunday night, and that's okay. I'd rather work non-traditional hours and have the freedom to do things. One of the funny things is, and I'm sure you get it, Matthew, I know you get it as well because we talk about it. My uncle called. We're not terribly close. We just don't talk all that much. He lives in Wisconsin, and they're getting ready to retire, and he wants to go to Europe for 3 to 6 months. And he's like, "Hey, you're self-employed. Would you be willing to like live in my lake house in Wisconsin for like 6 months this summer, kind of watch the animals and take care of the property? And I was like that sounds cool, but I have, yes, I'm self-employed, but I'm not unemployed. I have, obligations. I got family. I got all these things in place. So it's like, I appreciate you thinking of me like that, but that's not quite how this whole thing works. So I'm sure you run into that from time to time as well.
You always get that. And the other thing you always get when you're self-employed and people know it is they say, hey, I've got a great business idea. I'll give you a percentage of it if you start it and run it for me.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's not quite how it works. The business idea is not the most important part of the business.
Well, that's where developers really get hit with that as well. You
Yeah,
see that.
exactly.
And I've learned that. They're like, hey, you're in software. I have this app idea, and I usually just hold my hand up and say, let's just let's not go down that path.
I've had a lot of people, upon finding out that I sell on Amazon, start telling me how lucrative e-commerce is because they know a guy who knows a guy. I'm like, yeah, that's why I do it.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not doing it just for kicks and giggles. I'm actually doing it for the profit potential.
Right.
Well, cool. Well, Josiah, thanks for sharing your story. I hope that's useful for those that maybe haven't yet started. Again, we love to say books are the gateway drug. It's a phenomenal way to learn the business. Many of us stick around with it. Some of us add to it. Some of us pivot, move away from it as well. So no matter where you are in your journey, I think it's a really relatable story. And thanks for jumping on and sharing that with us. We're going to take some questions from the audience. I saw a couple come in here. We'll address those in just a minute. So if you do have questions, go ahead and post those either on Facebook or on YouTube. We'll jump into some of those here as well. But we're going to shift to kind of our last segment. We're going to call it the geek out moment. So what is something you've been learning? We'll ask Josiah and Matthew and myself. But what is something you've been learning or geeking out or nerding out about over the last week that you think might be relevant, whether it's business, whether it's a productivity tip? And I'll jump in first. I've been playing around with Notion, and it's something I've used for a bit. It's sort of like Trello, but it actually has a database component built into it. So it's Notion. I think it's .so. Yeah, Notion.so. I don't know what country code that is, but it's basically Trello, meaning like a Kanban chart where you can move things like from a to-do list from, here's my ideas, here's what I'm working on today. You can move them over. It's got basically a SQL or a database component built into it, which allows you to talk from board to board. What that does, we use it in our consignment business. I'm really just scratching the surface in terms of what it can be used for. But for example, we can set up a consignment client. Let's call them client A. We can set up shipment. So when they send us a shipment, we say, hey, this has been shipped to us from client A. And then that Kanban board or that Trello chart, so to speak, essentially feeds back into client A. So now I can go click on client A and it pulls in all their shipments. It pulls in all their payments. It allows us to really track the business and do things pretty effectively. So I'm just scratching the surface. I'm sure there's a ton of other things I can do with it, but check that out. They have a free plan as well. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but it's something good that our team has been using. I've been getting my virtual assistants on there, and that's been a really good, just kind of central cloud-based repository for us to mess around with. So check out Notion. Matthew, do you have anything fun you've been nerding out about lately?
Little. So on the note of Notion, I've looked at Notion a few times and kind of started that free account to mess around with it. And it's one of those tools I figured out that there's so many different ways you can set it up. It's almost overwhelming at first because you don't know what to set up. Because like you search anything, how do you do this? Like, yeah, you can do anything. You can put a list, you can put a picture, you can put a diagram, like anything. And so I think Notion, you have to have a really good idea in your mind of what you're trying to track and the best way to track it. And then Notion will help you build that pretty much however you want to. But it's tough to go in there, that blank slate, and just look at that and be like, all right, well, what am I going to build here to best track things? So I'm really curious to see some of the stuff you've built out there and see kind of how you built some of those pages out on Notion. But one of the things, this is more a productivity type thing I've been trying to do more the last probably only like 4 or 5 days when I really kind of had this realization and started trying to put this into practice, was that I always told myself that I wasn't very good at making lists and keeping track of things and writing things down. And some people just like to be that organizer that writes everything down and keeps a journal and does all this. I was never really that person that tried to like write everything down. And so I told myself, that's not my personality type. I'm more of a just go with the flow type thing. But what I realized is that even though I thought I was, you really can never be great at improving on something you're not tracking well. If you I always thought I was tracking my workouts well, my time well, all these different things. But once you actually take the time, and for me, I had to force myself to sit down and actually track what I was doing with my time, or what I was eating that day, or what I was doing in the gym that day. You come to find out what you think you're doing is actually sometimes very different than what you're actually doing. And so the last like 5 days, I made a goal to myself to start just tracking. I picked 3 different areas of my life where I'm just going to track everything I do in this area. And I'm just going to force myself to, whenever I, for instance, take something out of the pantry, I'm just writing it down real quickly on the app. There's tons of apps you can do for diet and stuff like that. But just to track, I'm not setting goals for it. I'm not doing anything right now. I'm just going to track it for 2 weeks and see where I stand with different things, and then make my goals based on what I'm actually doing, not what I think I'm doing. Working out the same way. Like, I've been working out for a long time. I know what I'm doing. I make different workout programs, so to speak, for myself every once in a while, but I wasn't tracking every lift. I wasn't tracking every set. I wasn't tracking what weight I was using. And so I could kind of see where I was progressing in different areas, but not near as much if I actually wrote everything down that I was doing, that I had something to at least reference, even if it's not permanently, even if it's just for the last 2 weeks. You can get a much better idea of where you're spending your time and how to actually set a goal that'll improve you in that area. So I've been tracking. It's not in my nature to track things in detail, and I probably won't do it permanently, but I will be committing to it for the next 2 weeks. Some of the things I'll be doing 30 days just to get a much better idea of where I am, to track the progress I can actually make in that area of my life in the future. And time management is one of the big areas I found out I was not as good in certain parts of my life as I thought I was with tracking my time and what I was actually spending my time doing.
That's fascinating. I love that mentality too, because you know that it's going to be a burden to try and do it all the time, right?
Oh,
To
yeah.
things is
I would
difficult.
die.
But the fact that you're committing to say, "Hey, I care about what I'm eating, or what my time is being spent on," and you say, "I'm going to do it for a time," and kind of get into that, that's going to hopefully pay dividends, because you're going to figure out some habits, some areas where you're probably being ineffective or maybe extremely effective, and then kind of do more of certain things or less of others.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll trade you some Notion tips for some insights into what you're
Yeah,
learning.
sounds good.
Josiah, you got anything fun you've been geeking out about lately?
Yeah. I've really been working this year on letting go of certain aspects of the business, delegating them out or outsourcing them. And you mentioned the tracking spreadsheet. I did use that, but a little late into my book game. And that's something I've always struggled with, is the accounting side. And it wasn't until about 6 months into being full-time on Amazon that I just realized I didn't actually know how much profit there was each month. There was a point where we were taking out more money than the business was generating.
Yep.
And that was kind of a big wake-up moment. And so I've been working over time to recover from that, and using QuickBooks and Inventory Lab and other softwares and things. But recently I decided it's time to get an accountant to do the bookkeeping stuff. And so I've been getting that set up the last 2 weeks, and I'm really excited to actually have that 100% clarity on what those numbers are. Because for the last year, it's kind of been, well, the profit last month is in this range, give or take a couple thousand, which is good, but I need to do better. And so I'm real excited to see how that benefits the business and the growth further on from there in tweaking and creating efficiencies. Maybe I still have a Scout IQ subscription that I need to cancel that I don't know about.
You don't.
But yeah, I know I don't.
Well, I guarantee that effort you're putting in will not go to waste. I love the fact that, again, you had that you built a number. You asked, what does it cost to be Josiah, and built that number and said, here's my target that I have to get to. And then you kind of built your Amazon business around that goal. But if you have that goal, but you don't have a scoreboard or a way to track it, then you just don't know. And again, when I asked the questions, again, it's 2 years ago, so you might have been tracking at the time. But if you don't know if you're making money, or don't know how much money, then it's hard to know, like, am I being successful? Is this going to work? Am I building towards something that's sustainable? And if you don't know what you're tracking, then that is certainly going to be an issue. So whatever it is, whether it's time, productivity, bookkeeping is a big one, and it's a lot of effort to set up and get someone trained and make sure that they've got access to everything. But once they are, that's an investment that will pay massive dividends for you. So kudos to doing that. And I'm a big believer in going upstream and finding things you can do, even though it's extra work up front. It's always extra work to train somebody or bring, set up systems or hire a VA. But those things will continue to pay dividends long after you've set those up. Well, that's cool. Hopefully you guys learned a little something from the Geek Out moments. You can always share some things you're learning as well. And we'll continue to have new guests on here that will share some of those productivity tips as well. So we'll keep that segment going. All right. It's we've been going just over an hour. We're going to be starting to wind things down. We do have a couple questions. So if you do have questions for Josiah or for Matthew or myself, you can drop those below. We'll take just a few more and we'll wrap this up probably in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So Matthew, I've got a couple here. I'll kind of
throw up any ones you see. Yeah.
I didn't realize I had the power to do this all along. Have I?
Yeah.
No. Well, I've been missing out. So Colt jumps in and says, "Hey, Caleb or anyone else." So that's all you guys. I'm sorry to jump in. I'm at a location right now helping a friend in financial trouble. Tons and tons of good stuff. I'm not sure what percentage to pay. Sounds like a consignment type deal, but they need some cash, so probably paying cash up front. So in general, the more sure you are about an item, if you scan a book with $10 profit and it's got an e-score of like 150, so it's selling nearly every day, you can probably afford to pay a big chunk of that projected profit because it's almost guaranteed to sell quickly. On the other hand, if you scan something that doesn't sell very often, then you want to pay less. So as a rough rule of thumb, I kind of break it into thirds. So if you scan a bunch of items, I think it's worth about $100, I would typically pay about 30 to 35 bucks for it, because you're probably not going to sell, roughly 20 to 30% of the inventory. So let's call it a third just won't sell. A third, you'll double your money, and a third, if you pay a third and you sell 2/3, you'll double your money. So that's a good rule of thumb. If you're really confident about the inventory, if it's in great condition, if it's got great ranks and e-scores, you can maybe ramp that up a little. And if it's longer tail stuff, if it's not in the best condition, you may want to pay a little bit less than that. I don't know if Josiah or Matthew have anything else to add there, but I like the rule of thirds. I typically pay about a third of what I expect it to actually generate in terms of profit, because a third won't sell. And then when 2/3 do, I end up doubling money.
Yeah. No, I think it's good. The only thing I read there is helping a friend out in financial trouble. So I'd probably err on the side of giving a little more than giving a little less, but it depends on your financial situation and stuff like that, of course, too. But sometimes if you have those means, it's good to help out when there's someone in trouble there or having some financial trouble. So yeah, maybe err on the side of the higher end of those ones.
And again, it depends on how close that friend is to you. So
that's very true. Very true.
Again, business, you end up doing things, and that's the cool part. Once you got kind of your needs met, or even if you don't yet, it's really important to start building those habits of being charitable and giving. So if there's options that may not make as much sense on paper, but allow you to help a friend that's in trouble, then by all means, go ahead and overpay, especially if your business can afford it. That's something that you just got to figure out and wrestle within yourself. But that's if they're really close, or if you know a little bit more of their need and can help, don't be afraid to overpay, and just kind of take that as a break even, or maybe a small loss on your side as well.
Yeah.
Jamie, this is a question for Josiah, says, how did you get through your getting ungated opportunity? So outside of books, which are typically available to sell, I'm assuming you moved into some gated categories. So can you share a little bit of insight into how you were able to ramp up into other categories?
Yeah, so your account age is going to help you get auto-ungated in certain things more easily than others. If you scan something, say on the Seller Central app, and it says you're gated, always request an ungating right then. And you might be surprised, you might get it. If you don't, the main way to do it is to get invoices from authorized distributors or directly from the brand or wholesalers. And there's a lot of information out there on YouTube and the internet if you want to look for specific brands and how to do that.
Yep. And again, those are hurdles where not everybody can sell electronics or certain toys or beauty products. And so if you're willing to go through that extra step and get ungated, that then makes it a little bit of a greener pasture where there's a little bit less competition. Nicole says, third time here, just getting started. Thanks for watching. Again, if you are newer, we do have free content available. If you are a Scout IQ subscriber, you can go to app.scoutiq.co. We have something called Book Flipper University, and we actually have free training. Matthew actually brought a camera in. We went to a thrift store, a couple of them actually, and walked through the process of what does it look like to scan? How do you interpret the data? What do you do with the books? How do you list them? So we literally walk you through how to set up an account, how to source inventory, how to list it, and then a little bit of account management. So that's all available for free. And of course, you can go back and watch any of the Books and Bourbon series as well on YouTube. Allie Brown says, I currently use AccelerList for tracking expenses, but it isn't very detailed. What would you recommend that could be more detailed? Well, glad you asked. Matthew's got it up. Thebookflipper.com/ this is the tracking spreadsheet. It's what I use to manage all of my Amazon business expenses, everything. I've got mileage in there. I've got my inventory costs. Anytime I pay contractors, I put that in there. I can put eBay revenue in, but it essentially allows you to dump your listing data, which you can get from AccelerList, ScanLister, or the listing spreadsheet, or even Inventory Lab. And then you pull your Amazon reports, and it actually gives you really detailed accounting. It lets you see if your business is making money, and more importantly, how much. And then it gives you some really good insights into your sources as well. So check that out. And give you a little bonus. You can use coupon code BONUS50, BONUS50 at checkout. You'll save $50 on that spreadsheet. There's no monthly fees with it. It's a one-time purchase. And like everything we have, we do stand behind it. If you're not happy, if it doesn't work for you, we'll give you a full refund within a timely fashion. So check that out as well. A couple other questions that pop up.
That looks like it's in English.
Yeah, Romer says I look 5 years younger. That'd be Cinco Años. I don't know, younger. Anyway, Romer's in, I believe, Colombia. For those that are tracking him, he's trying to speak Spanish only for several months and become fluent. So that's kind of a fun story. You can check him out. Avery, post your Instagram handle. I think it changed. It used to be Romer, the Romer. It might be Romer L Romer, but post your Instagram handle. We'll share that as well. Nicole says, I have a question about Scout IQ. Is there a function to turn on to get the sell back your book offers or value that we talked about with Bill on the show? Yep, you can go into settings on the app and then go under wholesale integration. And then there's an option for sell back your book. And then you can turn audio cues on or off, and that'll show up. And there's some training videos as well. If you just go to YouTube and type in Scout IQ plus sell back your book, you'll see some training videos that we shot in our lovely Denver office. Rest in peace. We miss you, Denver.
Mm-hmm.
That is on by default now. So if you do download the app in the recent future or recent past, that setting is turned on for you. You can always opt out of it. Of course, we took a page out of Amazon's book as well. Hoven would be younger. That's correct. Hovenus. Romero L. Romer. So there you go. So instead of Romer the Romer, it's Romero L. Romer. You can follow him on Instagram. And that's his Spanish Instagram to translate that. Cool. Nicole says, thanks for the wealth of information. And I don't know if there's any other questions. Well, that might be about it. Well, on that note, we will leave you all. So thanks for showing up. This again was episode 8. We had Josiah from Instagram, or from Alaska rather. I was going to say, what's your Instagram, Josiah, for those that do want to follow you or kind of follow your story or learn more about you?
Yeah, it's baconbagel_AK.
Are those two your favorite things?
Yeah, well, my last name is Nagel, and so that's a tough one for a lot of people to spell. So bagel, everybody knows how to spell. And I do enjoy bacon. Actually,
who doesn't like bacon?
I got a bagel right here.
Perfect.
Nice.
It goes well with bear meat and whatever, and salmon, I would imagine, whatever else you can catch.
Absolutely, yeah.
Baconbagel_AK for Alaska. You can follow Josiah. And with that, we will tune out, and we will catch you all next week for episode 9. And if you do know anybody that you would like us to interview, drop us a line. You can hit me up at caleb@thebookflipper.com, or you can comment here. We do have a couple people lined up, but we would love to keep this going. So this is episode 8. Hopefully we'll be here through episode 80. Who knows? But we're glad you're here. And on that note, we will say one final cheers. And thanks for showing up. We will catch you next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Cheers. See you guys.
Cheers.